Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. It is Thursday evening, the 17th of January, 2018, and tonight's topic: Trump to Pelosi, stay home. And he takes the keys to the military jet as Nancy Pelosi was set to take a congressional delegation on a jaunt that was supposed to take her to Brussels, Egypt, and eventually to Afghanistan. Well, that's not going to happen. We're going to discuss that later in the program. And we're also going to discuss a FISA revelation that broke yesterday, as well as some news on Russia, China, and of course the markets. Let's get into what happened in the markets today. Well, today was a lackluster day for a while in the equity markets. And then later on in the day, there was news that perhaps the United States was going to take a bit of a pause on the tariffs on China, and boom, stock market soared. Broke back just a bit. However, at one point, the Dow Jones was up to 24,450. It came down about 80 points from there, but still managed to close 161 points higher. And that was good for a 0.67% gain. You're clearly seeing the Trump pump, assisted by the Powell put. NASDAQ up nearly 50 points to 7,084, up 0.71%. And the S&P 500 up nearly 20 points to 2635. And that was also good for a 0.76% rise. Let's take a look at gold and silver. And I've got some interesting charts for you as well on the seasonality of gold and silver. But first, let's just take a look at the prices and what happened today. And of course, our famous gold-silver ratio, the gold price today. Let's take a gander. Was up for a, well, no, it happened again today. We defaulted to the 15th. Let's make sure we get the right prices. Here we go. Gold price today, the 17th. Not much movement. Closed down about 1.47, $1.47, really just a 0.11 decline. And currently that was at 1291.84, and right now we're pretty much at the same level in after hours trading. Silver, classic movement again. Gold went down just a little bit, and silver went down just a little bit more. And here we see the 17th price for silver. Gold was down 0.11%, and silver was down nearly 0.5%, and that only takes 7 cents to take it there. And it closed at 15.50, and it's up at 15.52 now in after markets. And what did that do to the unsustainable gold-silver ratio that's trending to 16-1? The natural ratio comes out of the ground at 9-1. Should be 1-1 because silver is rarer than gold. And all the stuff you hear the silver pumpers say, well, what did it do? It headed closer towards 84 today. At one point, it was at 83.5, and it closed at 83.3. Now, let's take a look at some of these charts I want to talk to you about in the gold and silver. And I won't forget to hit the cryptos. Last night and the night before, I think I missed even giving you the closing or the current prices. But let's take a look at some charts, and then I've got a news story on Smaulgld. And let's first start with gold. A lot of people try to say as they go into the new year, well, gold generally rises at the beginning of the year, and we're going to get ready for the bull market. Nick Laird over at Gold Charts or Us put together this wonderful chart here. And he did it on a 5-year, 10-year, 20-year, and 45-year average. And anyone who says that gold goes up at the beginning of the year is generally correct. Last 5 years that's been true. That's the red line. You can see it straight up. 10-year average straight up. And a lot of these, obviously they're subsumed within each other. That's why they're directionally heading that way. The 20-year average up, and even the 45-year average up. And then you can see a trend pretty much for all of the averages where it settles down in March. You get your boost, and then it hangs around, and then around August or September, not in the last 5 years, but the last 10, 20, and 45 years, it heads higher. However, in the last 5 years, if you can see on the red, it looks like once September comes, it's done. It just goes down, 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 at least the 5-year average. Now let's take a look though. What happened last year? Now it looks like the 5-year average, it's the most recent experience we have. It goes up, hangs around, goes down a bit, goes up a bit, and then boom, heads down the last 5 years. But what did it do last year, gold average? Let's take a look at those other seasonal averages versus just the 1 year last year. Now this was a bit of a difference. Instead of continuing its descent like it did the last 5 years, starting in September, it started to move up, and you can see it cross paths with the 5-year average. However, that increase towards the end of the year is more in line with what we've seen in the 45-year and 20-year averages. So you really can't say in any given year what's going to happen, although it's a safe bet probably to think that it might go up at the beginning of the year, because even last year it did that as well. As you can see in the gold line, the 2018, every average, and including the gold line, 2018, it went up in January. I don't think there's a average or a year, well, there's definitely been years, but there's not been an average in the 5, 10, 20, or 45 year, and nor was there in 2018 a decline in January. January looks like a pretty robust month, averaging 3, 4, 5% gains within that month. And generally it continues through to February, and then it levels off. Now silver is different. Silver is not the same as gold. Let's take a look at those silver seasonal averages. Different trend. The 5-year average. This is very telling because this is what you've all probably lived through. It's a very disappointing thing. Let's just focus on the red line, the 5-year average. So for the last 5 years, you get pretty excited. The year opens up. You get a 6% gain. You see those U.S. Mint numbers. They look pretty solid. Now we're talking about going back to 2013, and that, remember, is post the drop from 2011 when silver fell from $50 an ounce. And it looks like the last 5 years that, okay, past year is over, let's get ready, bull's going to start. Prices average 6.5%, 7% rises in January, and then in February they catch another bid. And then it's all downhill since then. You can see by mid-February, average price rise in silver was about 8, 9%. That is looking good, and that gets people excited. That makes it look like we're off to the races. And then you see the red line just goes down, 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 down to August. And then you get a little glimmer of hope in September and October. Might rebound just a little bit, and then boom, it just collapses into the end of the year. Only to start the process over again on average, where January and February are looking good, and then it's not what happens. Now, gold, silver like gold has the same shoot out of the gate. 10-year average, 20-year average, 45-year average. It's like January to February, let's get on the gold train, let's get on the silver train, and up it goes. In fact, let's get on the train and hang on until about March or April. And then it starts to go down. Although in prior averages, 10, 20, and 30-year average, basically went up, it would kind of hold its gains, maybe peak, it looks like in the fall, September, October, and then meander towards the end of the year and finish a little higher. But you could see in the last 5 years, you sell in September, and then boom, the year is over, and you're looking at a loss. All right, now how did last year compare to all of this? We are going to take a look. Let us take a look. Silver seasonal averages versus 2018. 2018 was a bit of a divergence, a real divergence, given the 5-year average overall was an increase. It looks like in January, We did not shoot out of the gate very well in 2018. We didn't really have those Silver Eagle sales either. Went up a bit, went down a bit, and then treaded water, tried to make a couple of little pumps in April and June. And then it had this prolonged period from around June 15th to about December, very beginning of the month, where it just went pretty much straight down. You can see that. It started earlier in 2018 than the prior 4 years, the decline. However, what you do see in December, which is different than pretty much every other year, is an increase at the end of the year. We rallied off the low in December, and it looks like we're somewhat stagnating off of that rally, but the month isn't over, so we'll just have to see how that all works out. Very interesting charts. What they tell me is you really can't count on anything other than generally an increase in January in the precious metals. It just seems to be the case on average. It happens. Why it happens? I think it happens because people start the year out, they get bonuses, they have a little extra money, and they put it into things and they buy it at the beginning of the year. And then I think what's happened the last 5 years is people get disappointed that the prices hadn't really done what they expected to. A little disappointment, and then you see something like that. You see, we got them all. We're done here, and we're not going any further. All right, interesting charts. Thanks to Nick Laird for those. One other thing on gold, Sam Zell. I don't know if you guys know Sam Zell. He's a buyout guy. Generally successful, though he's bought some clunkers. But he came out today, gave an interview, and he said he bought gold for the first time in his life. And his rationale for buying gold, he said, was a simple supply-demand dynamic. Now, we talked the other day about the Goldcorp and the Newmont mining merger. And what we mentioned was that merger was basically trying to put two companies together to pool their administrative costs and try to get their overall costs down. And one of the things we noted about the merger was they were planning on selling $1.5 billion worth of, looked like, underperforming assets. And I had mentioned that who's going to buy underperforming assets, because as a whole, the two of them are generally underperforming on an all-in sustaining cost than some of the other large miners. So whether there's synergies there or not, we're not sure. But he pointed out that this type of action is indicative of an industry that's not expanding, and that if they're going to spend and allocate their capital towards buying other companies rather than trying to buy and develop new mines, that to him would indicate that we're not going to have the same supply coming online in the next few years, 5-10 years. And that is a point we noted, that when we looked at the Newmont mining projections, that they're expected to increase gold mining production next year, but then for the next 3 or 4 years, they had projected outward pretty much a 7, 8, 9% decline. So he may be on to something there. He does make some good bets. He does make some bad bets. But this is his first bet on gold, so we'll keep an eye on gold for Mr. Zell. What else have we got? All right, let's get into the cryptocurrencies. The cryptocurrencies had a fairly good day today, at least last time I looked. Let's see if they've done anything to change that. Nope, Bitcoin up a little bit, 36.39, up 0.85%. Ethereum up to 122, up 0.45%. Bcash at 129, up 1.67%, and Litecoin at 3153.80. And on one thing to note is Bitcoin has a total supply that is going to be 21 million. They have already mined, I think, 17 million and change, maybe 17.5 million of those Bitcoins. Excuse me. So 83% of them are already accounted for. And a lot of those have been already lost. Many of them lost in the early days when people would buy 10,000 of them and then lose them and not realize they were going to be worth anything. And other people just lose them. They forget the passwords to their keys and so on. Now, Litecoin's a little further behind. Litecoin has a total of 84 million cap Litecoin to be mined, and they're saying now that Litecoin is now at about 60 million. Also, just worth noting that Litecoin has actually done some public relations through the Litecoin Foundation. They sponsored this, I think it's this UFC championship bout where they put the Litecoin thing on the mat there. And they have another fighter who's also supporting, or they're sponsoring him. So there is some interesting, unlike Bitcoin, where it's totally decentralized. What I mean is no one's running any type of, there's no like a foundation. There's not even a foundation that's really running PR, and there's core developers, but they seem to not be the same cohesiveness as the smaller Litecoin team is with Charlie Lee. I guess he donated some of his money proceeds to that foundation, and that's how they paid for that sponsorship. So it's interesting. But remember, Bitcoin and Litecoin are not centralized. They're not companies. They don't run. They're not the currency. They're not looking to make a profit from anything that the currency does, other than perhaps the increase in value in the price of the cryptocurrency. All right, let's move on now to China. We always got to cover China. Well, China now is full-on stimulus again. The whole idea of them going to deleverage is not going to happen. The other thing I mention a lot is just China to crush the dollar. And I mention all the time, China runs on dollars. China has external debt denominated in dollars. Its state-owned enterprises run on dollars. Why? Because it's more credible than running on yuan. And here you have a story in the Wall Street Journal. Dollar-hungry Chinese borrowers flock to junk bond market. Chinese companies have kept issuing high-yield dollar bonds even as sales from their U.S. peers shuddered to a halt. So again, China running on dollars and, of course, running on debt and stimulus. So this China to crush the dollar? I don't think so. Here we go. China's latest stimulus effort is simultaneously calming and unsettling investors. They are printing like mad. The People's Bank of China injected a record 560 billion yuan, or 83 billion, in the country's financial system, initially soothing investors, but of course getting them a little concerned that the company and the country runs on debt-fueled stimulus, despite what the gold pumpers try to say. And China signals more stimulus as economic slowdown deepens. China will aim to achieve a good start in the first quarter. They got to get that first pump in there. They got to just throw that $80 billion in there, and said the state planners on Tuesday. They're hoping that authorities will roll out ever more stimulus and that they'll never, ever stop. Let's get a little bit on Russia here. This was interesting. Someone asked me during one of the live streams if Russia runs such a tight ship in terms of the central bank, limited debt, decent mix of reserve assets, 18-20% in gold, why is its currency doing so poorly? And another thing you can ask is, well, given that their economy actually does pretty well, given that it looks like they're saying it's going to grow and overtake Germany as the 5th largest economy through exports of agricultural products and oil, it's somewhat of a mystery, but it's not really, it's because they have a good portion of the world against them in terms of sanctions. But again, Russia, if you have to compare the two, Russia and China, I know a lot of people think that China is this industrial powerhouse, and in some respects they are. But what undermines that is the whole house of cards, is the massive amount of central planning and debt that they take on. Now the consumers are taking on a lot of debt as well. Finally, before we get to our top story, which is also the Moronica of the evening about Donald Trump and Nancy Pelosi's spat, there was a FISA bombshell, but this is part and parcel of our discussion in a bit about deplatforming and the attempt to control the news. Now, in normal times, in a competitive journalistic environment, journalists are climbing over each other to get that scoop, to do that investigative journalism in the spirit of Bernstein and Woodward, trying to figure out what was going on in Watergate, who were the sources, who was Deep Throat. And the reason for that is not just professional pride, but it actually sells your newspaper. Because if the Washington Post, as it did, broke that story on Watergate, well, then the Washington Post would sell more papers. It can pay the investigative journalists more money. That doesn't seem to be the model anymore. Because what we've seen in the mainstream media, apart from Fox, is no interest whatsoever in covering anything that might look like the Mueller investigation may not have started off on sound footing with a proper predicate. That to them is a foregone conclusion that Trump has to go and we're going to find something on him, and they are going to find something on him. And none of the reporters they never mention, they don't look into the type of story that came out the other day. Now, this is not even one that requires investigative insight or uncovering anything. Bruce Orr, who is the number 4 guy, still there at the FBI, his wife worked at Fusion GPS, which was the conduit for the Steele dossier, and he had received information from Steele himself and also information of the dossier, and he told the people, according to his testimony to Congress back in December, that the information that was in the dossier was not verified and that they should really look into it, and also that the Clinton campaign had paid for the final product. Now, there's talk that the Republicans, certain Republicans like John McCain had, or I don't know if it was John McCain, but somebody had also tried to get some type of information. But the final product was paid for by the Clinton campaign, and he noted this stuff to people who are now on the Mueller investigation. He noted to Comey, and people who signed the FISA warrant, which was the warrant to spy on members of the Trump campaign, on the basis that this information from the Steele dossier was true. So they went to the FISA court 4 times, and they said, please allow us to issue a warrant, and that would allow us to continue spying. And Rod Rosenstein signed the last one. Sally Yates signed one. I think Comey signed the first one. And Comey has said that the basis on which they were looking into the Trump campaign wasn't the Steele dossier. There were other things, they say, but that's why everyone wants to know what's in the unclassified FISA warrants. But according to Orr, who worked at the FBI, still does, says that this was the basis, and McCabe said without the Steele dossier, we don't have a case. The gentleman to the right was saying that he told these people that they should check it out. Now, he's on the side of trying to take Trump down too, but he was smart enough to admit that when he passed along the information, he said it was unverified. And even Comey said at one point on TV that the information in there was unverified, but they had other information for which to cause their investigation into the Trump campaign. And just the other day, it came out that the reason that when Comey was fired, they opened another investigation was essentially on policy grounds. They didn't like what Trump had said on the campaign trail. He hadn't criticized Russia or Putin, and that the Republican Party platform took out some language that had agreed to provide the Ukrainians with military hardware to defend itself against the Russians. Now, these are policy issues which obviously the FBI should have no say whatsoever in, because imagine if when Obama did the Iran deal, the FBI investigated him for being an Iranian agent. I mean, the president has the right, with the advice and consent of the Senate, to conduct foreign policy. It's not for the FBI to say, whoa, what's Obama doing? What's Trump doing? It looks like they're changing. They must be Iranian agents or Russian agents or something like that. Now, you would think the press would be all over this, but they're not. The only time they're all over anything is if they think Trump has done something wrong. And that's fine. That's what they should do. That is the purpose of a free market press, which would be to examine what people are doing to make sure to keep them honest. That's the whole idea of the free press, that if you have a free press, then the politicians won't get away with stuff. But what's happened is, it seems to me that the free press is no longer the free press. They're bought and paid for by each party, and they only report on things that are advantageous to their side, or if they think it's deleterious to the other side, they're going to harp on that. And that is, in a sense, very, very similar to what we see happening with the deplatforming of individuals. So, for example, when you deplatform someone, you take away their ability to speak. You don't allow them to speak, and then you go one step further, and you don't allow them to transact. You take away their payment processing. And that is a way of depersoning someone. And in a way, the press is doing the same thing by refusing to, or just ignore stories like this FISA shocker, so to speak. DOJ official, which is Bruce Orr, warned the Steele dossier was connected to Clinton and might be biased. Now, that's a big deal, because if you're going to spy on an American citizen and you're going to go to the FISA court, which is, so you're already on search and seizures, you're going to violate that unless you have some type of procedure in place. And if all you have to do is have people in the DOJ who are on your side, and you just say, oh yeah, we got some documents here, you go to the FISA court and you sign off on it as if it's a procedure that's been properly vetted, then you can spy on anyone. And then you could just weaponize the Department of Justice. Now, I'm not concluding that they've done that. However, if I were a investigative reporter, I'd be interested in a story like that. I'd be interested in trying to get that information and find out. But what it appears happens with the media today is they don't have to do any investigative reporting. It appears that they curry favor with people in government that have a bias and that leak information to them. And the way they succeed as a journalist is not by ferreting out information in an objective way. It's by currying favor with people who are not objective, but are, in some respects, political hacks who are going to funnel you that information. Now, as a reporter, if that's how you have to make your living, that's how you're going to make your living. If you are sitting there and there's a Democrat or Republican who wants to leak information to you, then that's how you're going to succeed. And you're going to get the top stories. And that's what's happened now with, apparently, with James Baker, who was the general counsel of the FBI. Apparently, he's under criminal investigation for leaking. There was a guy who had leaked information to a New York Times. Older guy, he had been leaking information to younger women that worked as reporters to, quote, help their careers. And then you see Dianne Feinstein and someone else, I forgot who it was, saying, oh, you got to go light on him. And it's almost as if leaking is the new thing to do. And I think that's a big danger. I think there's less of an issue with the media and more of an issue with the ability of public officials to leak stuff, because that makes the media lazy. And if they can just get their information and work for the inside, as you may call the deep state, and the deep state can be Republican or Democrat, just it seems it happens to have been Democrat the last few years, they can do their job that way. And then the whole system doesn't work because the people on the inside essentially use the media as a mouthpiece for their political activities, which in most cases they shouldn't be doing in the first place. So, for example, the FBI is not supposed to be political. They're not supposed to be going after political people like Donald Trump. That's different than when, for example, Dianne Feinstein, who is a Democrat and should be pursuing partisan policies, that's her job, but she shouldn't be leaking. But that's a little different than the FBI leaking and having a partisan view. And I think that is something that people haven't, they haven't really, if you're for the result, i.e. it gets Trump, that pleases a lot of people, and they don't really consider how it's done. It's the end justifies the means, but very short-sighted, because that end, that justification of that end could eventually be used against your person or your party, and you've condoned the use of government officials in tandem with media to take other people down. But here's just another one. Weeks before the FISA application, Bruce Orr warned the Obama DOJ and FBI that Steele dossier was connected to Clinton and Steele, and that Steele was desperate that Trump be defeated. And then Steele had himself admitted his own bias. So this story, you would think, would be front page news, not because it exonerates or it helps or it hurts any particular party. The fact that they do this stuff, or appears to have done it, comes from the mouth. And if it's fake and Orr is just making this stuff up, well, then investigative reporters have to look into that, and they have to try to debunk what he's saying. But they don't even bother reporting on the story. Here's the Washington Examiner. Key Justice Department officials, including Mother Deputy, I think it was Weissman, knew about the how the FISA warrant was approved. Okay. And then finally, let us move into, there was a story about Roku. And it's interesting, Alex Jones has been booted off of every platform that there is. And again, we're talking about deplatforming people. And it's the same thing that happens as people cheer this on, like, oh, I don't like Alex Jones, it's a good thing we got rid of him. And again, if you don't defend the right of somebody to speak, then they eventually, if the powers are taken away from the companies that deplatformed him, they could just as easily turn around and deplatform you. And Roku, I don't even know how they managed to be going on so long without deplatforming Alex Jones. And I guess Roku, we have one. I've never used it. My family uses it. But I think what happens is with a Roku is you can just get stuff. It's not like it's a platform, but somehow Roku managed to not allow you to get InfoWars through its box or whatever that thing is. So A2 Roku. And that again is a problem because right now all of the platforms, social media, and so they all have a certain political bent. They all have a certain view on what hate speech is. They all are not concerned about what you would call free speech. They're concerned about what they view as social justice or fair play or a safe platform. And I actually heard somebody say, Nazis don't deserve free speech. You might agree with that. You might disagree with that. If you're a purist, you might say everybody deserves free speech. But the problem with the word Nazi is the word Nazi means anyone who disagrees with you. And that's, in a sense, that's almost Nazi-esque in and of itself. So we're seeing this issue where it's pervasive now throughout every industry, whether it's the journalists or the social media platforms or the hardware platforms, where the idea that they can shut you up is seems to be the trend. Now, you would think, and it is quite interesting, that 50, 100 years ago, someone like myself, who's essentially would never be able to reach more than 50 people, and I'd have to pay them to bring them all together to speak to them or to speak with them, is today, because of technology, so many people can reach so many people. This little channel can reach, on a given podcast, at the end of when it's all wrapped up, maybe a few thousand people, essentially all over the world too. And think about the bigger channels. And while that gives more people more opportunity to reach more people, it also can be shut off a lot easier. And if you're relying on reaching people and talking to people through the medium in which they've allowed you to reach all these people, you may end up reaching fewer people because just the way the world is, you're not out and about in the same way because you're reaching people through a medium and they just cut you off. All right. And in a sense, that's what Nancy Pelosi tried to do to has done to Donald Trump, is say, look, or he's our political enemy. We don't want him to be going on TV, giving him a platform so that he can trash us and tell us that we're against border security. And that's what she's trying to do, I believe. She doesn't want Donald Trump to have a platform, even if she could counter him because she knows she's, as we've seen, she's not as good as countering. And all right, let's get into the Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump spat.
Uh-oh, we got a moron here.
Presenting the distinguished international news commentator and foreign correspondent.
This has been an extraordinary week in world affairs.
No, I told Hillary Clinton that that's moronic.
Well, once upon a time it all started. Well, actually it started much longer ago than just a couple of days ago. We're going to start just a couple of days ago when Nancy Pelosi decided, due to the spat that they were having about having the government closed down and wanting to make it appear that we cannot have you come to the Congress to update us on the State of the Union if the government is closed. So, Mr. Trump, we've got security issues over there at the House of Representatives, and we really can't accommodate you over there. So why don't you just not bother showing up? And maybe, unless you can open the government, why don't you just provide your State of the Union update to us in a form of a writing? Now, she's within her rights to do that. The president doesn't have an absolute right to go into and to address Congress. You would expect that you would want him to do that, but the obligation is really just to update them, and he can do that by writing. Now, we know through tradition that the president is given a State of the Union. It's highly anticipated. It does have a TV audience. It's a widely reported on, and then there's a rebuttal afterwards. But Nancy Pelosi cited security concerns, which to me seemed a bit disingenuous before I even knew the whole story, in that the whole purpose of the shutdown, what they're fighting over, is security, the security of the border, which Democrats think it can be secured without a wall, and Donald Trump says it can only be secured if we include a wall. But she said, sadly, given the security current concerns, and unless the government reopens, which is really her demand, not the security concerns, she's just throwing that in there. She's basically saying, unless the government reopens, I suggest that you don't give your State of the Union, meaning I'm not going to allow you to give the State of the Union. Now, at least he can also, he's not, Donald Trump is different than you and me. If Donald Trump really can't be shut down. I mean, they can kick him off Twitter. He can go, if he went to like a third-rate social media platform you never heard of, then people would go there. If you or I get shut off from Twitter, we can go to another platform. No one would know we were there, and then you would never build back your moderate or modest or larger following. It'd be much harder. The president isn't really that disadvantaged. So, for example, he can go give the State of the Union on the date that it's scheduled to be given. He can hand in his thing to writing and then go give a rally in Tennessee. You have 50,000 people there all cheer and build a wall. So he really can't be deplatformed. But Nancy's actually trying that. She's basically trying to deplatform Trump by saying, yeah, we're not going to let you go and trash us about the wall and give your propaganda speech. The government's closed, and we're going to make it look like you can't speak because you won't open up the government. Well, can't just, well, the other thing about that was apparently Nancy didn't speak to any of the security people, didn't speak to the Secret Service or anybody. Department of Homeland Security and the U.S. Secret Service are fully prepared to support and secure the State of the Union. So that excuse, or the reason for not wanting Trump to give the State of the Union, had nothing to do with his security, the security of the people watching it, but more because she wanted to use that as, unless you open the government, we can't have you. But yeah, and the security's really bad. So what happens next? All right, Trump says no State of the Union, then no trips for no trips for the Speaker of the House. And he accomplished that today in pretty dramatic fashion, whereas Nancy Pelosi was all set to go on an well, it was scheduled, but it was unpublished, that she was going to take a congressional delegation to Belgium to meet with the NATO leaders, and she was going to go to Egypt for some reason, and then to Afghanistan. And just as she was set to go, Donald Trump put the hammer down. And he said, "Dear Madam Speaker, due to the shutdown, uppercase, I'm sorry to inform you that your trip to Brussels, Egypt, and Afghanistan has been postponed." Now you're thinking, how does Donald Trump have the right to postpone a trip by Nancy Pelosi and her congressional delegation? Well, she needs to take, especially if she's going to go to Afghanistan, the military jet, which is part of the executive branch. And he's saying, we will reschedule this 7-day excursion, as he calls it, when the shutdown is over. And then he says, in light of the 800,000 great American workers not receiving pay, I'm sure you would agree that postponing this public relations event is truly appropriate. Another swipe that she's going for public relations. I think she was going to get out of the country because then she wouldn't have to deal with the shutdown stuff, and she would think that she's leaving Trump there alone. Now, that cuts both ways. It looks like you're disaffected because there's really nothing a congressional delegation is going to accomplish overseas, especially when it's a new Congress. And you would think that Nancy Pelosi, if she was going to secure her position as Speaker of the House, would want to be meeting with all the new Congress people, talking about their assignments and talking about their strategy for opposing Trump. But no, she decided she was going to take this trip. Now, it may have been planned well in advance, but still, she wasn't the Speaker of the House, so she must have planned this pretty quickly to do this, and she probably thought it was part of a strategy. Now, she's been called out because now people know that she was going to go on this trip and be gone, and therefore not be able to negotiate in any faith on the shutdown, thus ensuring that people are not going to get paid. And of course, she's already said no to a wall, period. Doesn't matter. She give them $1. There's no money for a wall. Now, the other thing about doing this is people are saying that Trump is giving away the game that you're not supposed to do when someone is going to take a trip into a war zone. Well, that's true, but since she's not going, it really doesn't matter. It's not like she's going and he's telegraphing that she's going. You're not supposed to say that until after you leave the war zone that you were there. But he goes on, I'm sure you would agree that postponing this public relation event is totally appropriate. I also feel that during this period, it'd be better if you were in Washington negotiating with me and joining the strong border security movement to end the shutdown. Obviously, if you would like to make your journey by flying commercial, that would certainly be your prerogative. Well, she's not going to go to Afghanistan on a commercial flight. I don't think there is a Brussels, Kazakhstan, or Afghanistan flight. I don't think it would make sense for her to do that. I look forward to seeing you soon, and even more forward to watching our open and dangerous southern border finally receive the attention, funding, and security it so desperately deserves. Signed in crayon there, Donald J. Trump. And the reaction to that, well, here's an interesting, there's the baggage. It's not going anywhere. And by the way, he pulled this on her minutes before the plane was to take off. She had her congressional delegation all showing up in a big bus. I think she was already there. All the luggage was getting loaded. And then he took away the keys to the plane and says, do what you got to do, but you're not getting on this plane. So now Flimsy Graham, he doesn't like it. He says this is soft mark, tit for tat, inappropriate. And he says that this is inappropriate move to cancel Pelosi's international travel. And Flimsy was definitely not pleased. He thinks that this type of tit for tat thing is soft mark. Well, he may be right, but then you always get to, but she started it, and then you get into all that. Now, Senator Rand Paul came to Trump's defense, and he said that he supports Trump postponing Pelosi's trip. All right, let's see what you guys think. I think this is a very interesting. I don't know how this is all going to end up, but I'm sorry. Some very, very important. I have something to show you. Lucky is back in the news. Yes, Lucky the dog, the Doberman, and he is now on full guard. And this is a fine profile shot. We're going to leave this one up for a while. Oh, he's upside down. Well, you tilt your head. You I don't know why that's like that, but you can see that Lucky there is with his Smaulgld mug. And, well, we're going to take your comments now. I can't leave them up like that. It looks, let's see if this one works a little better. Nope, that's another picture of Lucky. But you don't want to go near that Smaulgld mug. But if you do want your own Smaulgld mug that you can cherish and protect, head on over to smaulgld.com and pick yourself one up. Free shipping. It looks expensive, but it's not. It's $7, $8 of priority shipping is subsumed in that mug price. $23.99 for the super classic mug and $19.99 for the classic mug, which is what you see Lucky defending there. And that gets to you in 2 days. It's shipped from Smaulgld headquarters. Personal note put in there, and off it goes. All the other mugs, they have to be purchased through the Smaulgld store. All the details at Smaulgld, SMAULGLD. You can check them out there. But let's now get into, these are the two that I can ship, the ones that I have on hand. That's the super classic on the left, the classic on the right. Okay, let's see what you guys are saying. All right, live chat. What's going on here? Okay. We've got to take our look here at our comments. Live chat. Scott Wardell, best story I heard today is he rebooks that address required by the Constitution at the border in Texas. Well, that's one thing I suppose you can do. You can do the address at the border in Texas. MK Hernes says, gold is moving up at the end of last year because the Fed can't raise interest rates anymore, so dollar will be weak. Yeah, there's always some reason why the gold price goes up or down, but it's interesting that the gold silver price on average always goes up in January. Okay. Ann Holloman, I think the Litecoin community, not the foundation. Yeah, there's Litecoin fam and all that stuff. I believe though that the Litecoin Foundation was the ones who paid for, I could be wrong, who paid for the mixed martial arts advertisement. But yes, there's people that are doing stuff on their own, running around, trying to get adoption, having meetings, and so on. Still want to know what the UN has to do with Litecoin. What do you mean? UN did a presentation at the Litecoin conference. Well, that I didn't know. That's a little suspect. What else do we have here? When you look at Litecoin, forget US dollar price. Litecoin, Bitcoin make more sense as tossing Molotovs. Scott Wardell, China's latest 83 billion, a drop in the bucket. There's a hole in my bucket, dear Lisa, dear Lisa. That must be a song that I don't know. If we go to war over Taiwan, China will crush the dollar, says Shark Air. Litecoin to mug ratio is what's very important, says Pablo. That is correct. You can watch the conference on YouTube. Let me make a note to do that. So you're saying there's a Litecoin UN connection. I'll check that out. Okay. Scott Wardell, go Russia. Whatever they say, overtaking Deutschland despite the oh no U.S. sanctions. Then there was Orr and Mueller. Seth Shepard says, gotta go until next time. Well, he's got his mug, so he's happy. He's just gonna head on out. What else do we have? De La Ville. Yes, they don't report stories that don't fit their narrative, which is why they're phony. Yeah, and Ann says it's become pathetic. They report either what they're paid to report or what is easy for them to report, and or what fits their constituents. What's happened is there's, you see it in alternative media, if you have a free market for media, even if it's not bought and paid for, even if you're being paid, like some of the channels are, to promote something, or like some of the mainstream media channels are paid to promote something, there's still an audience for what is to be promoted. It's not like they're trying to push content to you that you don't want to hear. So it's actually a really good thing for both the content provider, either the YouTuber or the mainstream media. If they get paid to push something at people that they're addicted to hearing, like game changer and silver set to skyrocket or Trump's going to jail. When you do that, then it works out, but it shows that many people, a bulk of your viewers, are really not interested in hearing what the news is. They're interested in hearing the narrative that they want to hear. So if MSNBC and Fox decided they were going to switch their programming and Fox was going to trash Trump all day, they'd lose their viewers. And if MSNBC decided they were going to look at the Mueller probe and do an investigation as to whether this Russian collusion thing is actually a hoax, they would lose all their viewers. So they're very smart in how they know where to get paid from so that they can produce the narrative that there's a natural built-in audience for. RWS Graha 1. I recently bought silver. Okay, and he achieved something. And NK Hernes agrees owning silver makes you more manly, he says. Okay, tell that to Gillette. Scott Wardell, he loves, I'm going to play it for you again. He always puts the time down when I play the Moronica clip. And he waits for it. And sometimes, like today, he had to wait half an hour. But here's what he waits for.
Uh-oh. We got a moron here.
Presenting the distinguished international news commentator and foreign correspondent,
This has been an extraordinary week in world affairs.
Now, I told Hillary Clinton that that's moronic.
That's moronic. Yes. And De La Ville says, we are watching a game of chess. And it's Nancy's next move. Yeah, I don't know how many moves they have left here. We talked about this a few days ago. I called it the irresistible force meets the immovable object. They've actually dug in over a $5 billion issue. And it's not about a $5 billion issue. It's really a death pit match. Is they want to get rid of Trump, and Trump wants his wall. And Trump knows that if he doesn't get his wall, the voters will get rid of him. And the Democrats want to get rid of Trump, so there's no point in compromising. But what's unknown is how long they can go on with this and who controls the narrative. Now, normally the president would win this. Any president would win this type of battle. The congressional leader, she comes from a small district, doesn't have nationwide support. The media is going to report on what the president says. Be a slam dunk, the president would always win. Except in this case, most of the media is against the president. So it's going to be not quite sure what's going to happen. Scott Wardell, checkers the dog. Yep, 1958. 1952, Nixon said. And he said, you know what? We're going to keep that dog. I remember that one. All right, let's see. What else? No, I don't remember that. Just kidding. It's the, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. I remember that in the fireside chat. No one is taking this mug, says Lucky. No way. Lucky is cute, huh? Dogs are the best there. All right, let's see. Lucky guards that mug as a Secret Service dog. Put him on the security detail. Have him sit next to Nancy. She'll feel safe. And De La Ville loves mugs too. Yes, indeed. All right. Well, I think that's about it. I'll make another pitch. I don't have to make any pitch. They're all up there on the screen. Your pitch is up there for Patreon. You can donate. You can become a proletariat. You can become a bourgeoisie supporter. As little as $2 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month. You can donate a spare house. But become a Smaulgld patron and join the crew there. Or you can make a one-time donation via PayPal. Or you can just hold your phone up and donate via Bitcoin or Litecoin, or even send a check or any other gift to Smaulgld LLC, P.O. Box 714, Dover, New Hampshire 03820. Or just go over to smaulgld.com and get yourself a mug. Thank you very much. If there's not any other questions, I'm going to carry on then. I'm going to say, oh, by the way, if you're interested in buying precious metals, you can also do that through the Smaulgld site. It's not investment advice to do that. But if you're going to do that, you'll pay no more, no less than if you go over to SD Bullion at this link here. I'll leave that for you. And I get a small commission, so that's always good. And you get decent products either at SD Bullion. You can go over to these Litecoin rounds are pretty cool over at they're at Golden Eagle Coin. You can buy those. They're really good. I'll give you the link for that. And also if you can go to Money Metals Exchange. Again, you pay no more, no less than if you visited these sites directly, except that if you do buy through them, I make a small commission, which is nice. It's always good to get commission. There, check those out. And let me give you Money Metals Exchange. Those are the 3 that I work with. As they say, you're not an affiliate, which is true, but they're affiliate links. So I want to make sure I say that properly. And here is you compare pricing and shipping at Money Metals Exchange, Golden Eagle Coin, and SD Bullion. I've heard all good things about all of them, so check them out. Thank you very much, and buenas noches, buona notte, guten Abend, and bonne nuit. Good night.